Okay, I call to order this meeting of the Morris Township Planning Board for March 6, 2023. The legal notice required in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act has been satisfied and a statement certifying same will be executed. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could you take roll call, please, Sonia?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Alesso,
Here.
Ms. Van Order,
Here.
Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Mr. Barrett,
Here.
Ms. Murphy. Here. Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Mr. Bai,
Here.
Mr. Warner,
Here.
Ms. Laney,
Here.
Mr. Slate.
Here.
And I, Sonia Santiago, here.
Oh, I said it.
We did?
Yes, I
Sorry,
did.
I didn't hear them. Okay, okay. I apologize.
Okay, first item for business, which is new for us, and we have Sonia to thank for it and our discussion last week, is we have actual minutes to approve for this meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes? Any?
Just a lot of typing. Thank you, Sonia.
Yes, very much thank you. Very useful, and maybe more than we need, but we
Oh,
can
yeah,
talk about it. Yeah.
I'll work on it.
Yeah, anything you can, yeah, I'll talk to you about it, but I know they're very useful. I think it'd be very, very, very nice to have them. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion the minutes be approved.
Second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think we need a different movement.
What?
Someone else needs to move the minutes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
I'll keep my second.
Yeah, and Mr. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you, son.
So you'll note the appropriate abstention. For the minutes. Those who are not at at that meeting cannot vote on the minutes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good point. Okay, the first order of regular business, then we have a couple resolutions, and I'm pleased that the conditions that allow us to actually look at the PB 1322 have been fulfilled. So if you want to fill us in, Mr.
Certainly,
Warner?
Mr. Chairman, the board will recall that the KW Home Creations LLC was a minor subdivision lot line adjustment with some variance relief at 9 and 7 Emmett Avenue. The variance relief was primarily 9 Emmett Avenue, lot 1501, and the board granted that application unanimously, a 9-0 vote with certain conditions, not the least of which was the requirement that before the resolution would be adopted, the affidavit or a similar documentary proof of a waiver of timely notice from one of the 200-foot property owners was required to be provided, subject to my review and approval of same, and I have it, and I have reviewed it, and I approve it. So in my opinion, that condition, which was a condition precedent, we rarely have those. Usually all the conditions are conditions subsequent to the approval. This was a condition precedent to the approval. So now the contingent approval is granted, and the board can adopt this resolution if we accurately memorialize the board's decision therein.
Thank you. Any comments on the resolution as written? Can we get a motion to approve then?
I move that we approve the
I'll second it.
resolution.
And I guess this is a roll call, right? Yes.
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Alesso,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
Mr. Bai.
Yes.
So moved.
Thank you all very much. Have a nice evening.
Okay. And then moving on to our next resolution, which is the Morristown Motors, which I think there's a little explanation here involved.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I'll do my best, and applicant's counsel.
He's at the microphone.
There he is. Is here as well to let you know where I'm incorrect. But the board will recall, we did vote about a month ago, but the request actually had the wrong date, essentially, for the extension of approval. So let me take a step back. This board has granted 2 one-year extensions already. About a year ago, in fact, a day shy of a year ago, we approved the second one-year extension for this application, taking the approval to May something 2023, May 5th, 2023. And this was originally, the board will recall, the approval was for a site plan and variance relief for the development of an automobile dealership repair and service facility at the existing Subaru of Morristown on East Hanover Avenue. The request, I think, had the wrong date and had it going till May of this year, which had already been granted. In effect, what the applicant was intending to do was to ask this board for a third and final one-year extension. We have the authority to do that as a planning board under the MLUL, 3 one-year extensions. So in that, this is really the third one-year extension to May 5, 2024. I have a resolution which would memorialize an approval, but the board should actually vote on that more clearly defined third one-year extension to May 5, 2024, as opposed to simply rely on the prior vote, which was, I will say, the board did what the applicant requested. The applicant may have meant to request a little something different. So, but with the chair's permission.
Yes, please, Mr.
Mr.
Newmark.
Newmark's here. So.
Board members, I'm Martin Newmark, the firm of Porcho, Bromberg, and Newman, representing the applicant. As Steve has indicated to you, there was a little confusion on whether this was the second or the third extension going to this year, May 23rd, May of 2023, which you had already granted last year. So we intended to request an additional year through May of 2024. That's what we're asking for. If the board feels the need to hear evidence on it, Mr. Power is here. Otherwise, I'll be at the board's pleasure in that regard.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I make a motion, we extend the application's approval for an additional year.
just a second. So do we need 2 votes, we're saying?
No, just one
Just the
vote.
one,
We
okay.
could- Since you have the
We have the resolution
as long
in-
as the resolution accurately memorializes the decision, you could do it in one vote.
Okay, thank you.
And I also recommend that we, motion that we also approve the resolution at the same time.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? So,
I have a comment on the resolution, which is on the top of the second page. The first whereas says whereas by letter dated December 19th, 2022, the applicant requested a third and final one-year extension. I think that should say something else. February 22nd, 2023 is the date on the letter that was in our package.
Yes, in fact, the December 19
the
request
original
was
one.
the not quite accurate request, the initial
Mhm.
request with the wrong date. So thank you. Yeah, that would be February. And I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
February 22nd, 2023.
23. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Would, is that, if that's the only
22nd.
change,
It's the only one I've got.
Mr.
Mr.
Lesso?
Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion with the change that Mr. Quillen just enunciated.
And I'll amend my second.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, Mr. Newmark, is the issue that the COVID pandemic through the
Correct.
scheduling and timing
It's
off by
still having an
1 year?
impact, that's correct.
No other comments.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, could you call the vote?
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson, oh, sorry. Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Bai.
Yes.
Did I miss somebody?
Mr. Chairman, before I leave, on your
You forgot to make a
agenda,
motion.
you have the,
Yes, we're going to make that announcement
okay,
right now.
Right,
Very
yes,
good.
yes, Yes, that was the next.
Mr. Alesso.
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm good. Don't move.
Thank you. Okay, now, before we move on to the first public hearing, we have an explanation on the second one. It's on the agenda for the second one.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And again, I have Mr. Newmark here to tell me if I, and where and when I go astray. But the Del Barton St. Mary's Abbey addition, the notification had a bit of a snafu. The personal notice, the mailings, certified mailings were all fine, both in content and timeliness. And the publication was fine in content and timeliness, except somehow it ended up, if I'm not mistaken, in the Asbury Park Press, as opposed to our more local newspaper. Mr. Newmark perhaps can share that, but in any event, we will be, well, let me, with the chair's permission, give him an opportunity to weigh in, of course, on this, but I think the board is going to be carrying the matter, and I could explain how it would be in my recommendation with further publication notice, of course, in a more local newspaper. But the certified mailing notices do not have to be redone because we are carrying tonight, and anyone who receives such personal notice is on notice to be here this evening, and we can carry without further personal certified mail notice, but certainly with republication in the correct newspaper.
I think you got it right as usual. We had sent it to the Gannett people, Daily Record, Asbury Park Press. We don't know whether there's a meeting going on down there and people are showing up, but we requested that the matter be carried to the next agenda, and Sonia has been kind enough to do that. With your permission, of course.
Any comments? I would like to apologize to anybody here in the public that may have been here to hear this, that this happened. It was, unfortunate error and mistake. But I don't see that we have much option other to carry it forward.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, so for all members of the public, the Order of St. Benedict's of New Jersey, St. Mary's Abbey addition, a site plan application, block 4501, lot 2.01, 230 Mendham Road in the OSGU zone. That matter is being carried without further personal notice, i.e. certified mail notice, but with further publication notice in the correct newspaper. It's being carried to March 20, our next meeting, correct, Sonia?
March 20th, yes.
20th at 7 p.m. in the same municipal building. And that is the notice, but for the publication notice.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, and moving on to the public hearing, the application that we do have before us tonight. Can you read off that application? Sonia?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is BA-01-19. That's a typo. Not 19. Morristown Motors is 22. BA-01.
Morris
No,
County
no,
Golf
that was the
Club.
resolution. This is the Morris County Golf Club.
Sorry.
That's okay.
This is PB 1522, Morris County Golf Club, for an amended preliminary and final site plan, block 9101, lot 2, 36 Punch Bowl Road in the OSGU zone. Applicant proposes to upgrade existing storage and maintenance facility on its existing golf course.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, as a predicate, I did have an opportunity to review the notice, found the content to be sufficient, found it to be timely served, certified mail on February 16th. The publication in a much more local newspaper than the prior one was February 13th, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So the board does have jurisdiction to hear and decide the application this evening, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Please
Chairman,
proceed.
thank you. Mr. Chairman, members, nice to see everybody this evening. Larry Callie on behalf of the applicant, Morris County Golf Club. Mr. Chair, members, I'd like to briefly frame what we hope to do here this evening. I think we'll be somewhat limited in our presentation since this is an amendment of a recent approved site plan. The genesis of the amendment is upon implementing the May 2022 site plan conferred by this board for development of various accessory improvements around the property, well within the 140-acre property. The applicant and their project manager and their contractor decided that certain aspects of the development might benefit from modifications, changes, implementations. And when all those came together, it technically triggered an amended site plan before this board. So some of the accessory improvements previously approved will not be implemented now. We're going to revert back to existing structures and uses in some aspects. Others will be modified, and other things are going to be newly implemented. The septic system is now proposed on the site for various reasons. Other improvements are going to shift a little bit and enough so that pre-existing non-conforming conditions that were approved by way of variance are now decreasing and being mitigated. Some are increasing slightly, but remember, in the context of this, the variances really are our distance to the property line and street line being closer to than the clubhouse is. We're still 600+ feet away with all of them. So it's relatively nominal on the numbers, but relief nonetheless. So the applicant is hopeful to undertake these improvements promptly if the board sees fit to approve it this evening. With that, Mr. Chairman and members, we've got 3 witnesses to present this evening to let you know the delta of these changes that we've got that we're proposing here this evening. First is our project engineer, Tim Derrick from Langen. Tim will be up shortly. Tim was the scrivener of record and the engineer during the course of the 2022 application. Tim will walk the board through the newly proposed changes as compared to the May 2022 approved site plan details. A lot of little nuances to it, but on the whole, it's relatively limited and innocuous from our perspective. And we'll walk you through those numbers as well as to what's staying, what's not, and what the delta is in the numbers. Jeff Roding is with us this evening as well. As you may recall, Jeff's the project architect that designed the newly proposed structures that have been approved. Not really anything has changed by way of those structures that have been approved that may be either implemented shortly or sliding as to their location. So we can call Jeff as needed, but we were thinking at the point at which the board gets the comfort level of what's changing in the field through engineering testimony, we might go right to planning testimony. And we've got Paul Rickey with us, our project planner, that will walk the board through the variances, notwithstanding the fact that they're relatively nominal and slight from the prior approval, and essentially the same relief, but in a different packaging. We think we need to explain to the board the justification for the bulk relief that's generated. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we think we'll be relatively brief and expeditious. And if you let us, we'd be glad to start with our first witness.
Yes, please.
And Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, with your permission, I'll swear in all 3 witnesses as well as our board professionals.
Thank you.
If you'll all raise your right hand. Do all of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We're going to try to get our plan images up on the screen, Mr. Chairman and members.
Good. Thank you.
And I think everything before you is identical to what's on file, or some of this
Yeah.
mocked up.
It's all the same as what was submitted.
So throughout the course of this testimony, Mr. Chairman and members, this should be identical to what's on file. Steve, we're not going to mark it unless you think necessary. I don't even think it's mocked up in color. I think it's an identical iteration of the filed site plans.
If it's the site plans, that's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there were subsequent exhibits that were provided.
I think right now we're going to go just with site plans and probably the entire evening.
Okay. Then that's fine, as long as you just reiterate the last revised date.
Sure. think I should just stay on mute. Yeah. I can never do this.
So
So just for the record, Tim, you are the scrivener of record, you're a licensed civil engineer, your license remains current and in good standing, and you were the project engineer during the course of the 2022 approval as well, is that right?
yes,
Okay, your license, as I proffered, it does remain current and in good standing, is that right?
yes.
Mr. Chairman, we'd offer Mr. Derrick as a licensed civil engineer to continue testimony on this project.
Yes, I'll accept. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I guess I'll just go to our,
She could confirm the date first, the last revision date for the record, Tim, please.
last revision is 12/9/2022.
Thank you.
I'll go to the second drawing in our sheet set, what we call the overall site map and tax lot plan, CS 002. There's not a lot of detail on here, but it does show the overall approximate limits of the overall property, the adjacent lots, and by comparison, the location of the development, the project area to the surrounding areas. As you can see, it's generally located in the middle of the property, central to Old Turnpike Road, Punch Bowl Road, and the clubhouse. Which
Excuse me,
Excuse me,
could you
sir.
move the microphone a little closer to you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. So the clubhouse is located approximately where my arrow is right now, and access to the maintenance facility is provided by a driveway off.
I'm
of
sorry, maybe a
Punchbowl
little
Road.
closer still?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Access to the clubhouse is provided by a driveway off of Punch Bowl Road. Just gonna go to our site plan because the site plan shows.
Is that CS 101?
This is CS 101, also dated last revision date 12/9/2022. The site plan demonstrates the new configuration of the proposed improvements associated with the maintenance facility as compared to what was previously proposed. The halfway house is still located approximately in the same location as was previously proposed. The existing shop building is to remain, and the car storage bins, which were previously proposed to be demolished, and an accessory building that were also previously proposed to be demolished, are also going to be maintained. Rather than demolishing the cold storage building and replacing it with a new cold storage building that also houses the fueling and washdown area and an environmental area, that instead is going to be, the cold storage building will remain and an addition or new buildings that built immediately adjacent to the cold storage building to house the environmental building and the fueling and washdown operations. As part of this, you can see that generally anything with hatching is areas where they're going to be providing either new asphalt or new gravel areas. And the limits and the overall disturbance area is less than an acre of disturbance and less than a quarter acre of new impervious area, so the project doesn't qualify as a major development. And I can, should I run through the?
Yeah, please continue. We'll go through questions once you're done.
Okay, I mean, the set, and generally the setbacks, and we've provided all the statistics on this site plan, but generally, as Larry mentioned before, although setbacks did change, they're nominal in relation to the overall property. It's just a matter of some are 10 feet closer, some are 20 feet closer, but the overall development is staying, the project area is staying in the same area. It's just the scope and scale of it is much less than before. Previously, the development now stays outside of the wetlands transition area, and any wetlands disturbances are also eliminated.
So Tim, what I'd like you to do is ultimately go through the numbers of that delta between the 2022 approved conditions and where we're changing, either for the better or worse. If there's no change, it's a no change condition. We don't need to discuss it. But before you do that, just generally speaking, and you sort of said this, all of the proposed improvements here tonight are in substantially the same location as that which they were prior approved on the property. Is that right?
Yes,
It's about a 143 acre site,
yes,
and we're well within what I'll call the belly of this property with this development.
yes.
The structures that we're talking about tonight, insofar as they're different from the 2022 application, relatively comparable in size,
Generally, yes,
height,
yes. Yes.
So if you could take the board through that chart, and then what I'd like to discuss is the septic thereafter, please.
Sure. So what I have on the screen now is a variance summary that was provided to the town at the request of the planner.
Maybe we could have that marked Exhibit A1.
Certainly, and it's entitled Morris County Golf Club Maintenance Facility Improvements Variance Summary. It's prepared by Langen Engineering, although no signature on here, and it is undated. We'll mark it as A1.
So what this chart shows is the different, except all these buildings are accessory structures because the primary structure is the clubhouse. But what it shows is the various accessory structures, the required or permitted dimensions, the previously granted variances from last year, the current requested variances, and then on the right, the difference. So I guess running through the different buildings that are there, the existing shop building, there's no change to the shop building, and that was previously proposed. So all of the variances and dimensions haven't changed. The existing cold storage building is to remain where it's previously proposed to be demolished and reconstructed with a new building. So required, for example, is a dimension setback from Punchbowl Road is 985 feet, whereas we're providing where the existing building is located 730 feet from Punchbowl Road. And so it's existing nonconformity, which will require a variance. Similarly, setback required from Old Turnpike Road is 2,800 feet, where 1,580 feet is provided. There's a reference there's a reference for Prescott Road that also, there's no setback required, but it's not, the note's not on here. I apologize.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, would that, if I may ask a question, would that be on there for reasons of being closer to the road than a principal structure?
Yes, I think there's just a line that was in there accidentally. There's no minimum side yard building setback for the zoning ordinance.
Right, but I guess my question is there a requirement nonetheless that the accessory structure not be closer to the street line than the principal structure? And might that be why that deviation is listed?
That's it, Steve.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me go back. I
So
apologize.
moving on to, we've got buildings to be demolished, and we're proposing new setbacks, and we're calling them as new variances, which they are, Tim.
Mhm.
And the dimensions, I'll just run through the first, because it's a lot of numbers. Proposed conditions are ranging from 730 feet, 1,580 feet, 1,170, 690, 1,455, and 1,310 feet. These are the numbers and dimensions of setbacks as proposed for the cold storage and environmental building structures. Yes?
Yes,
And then moving on to cart storage, I believe we're improving, mitigating the relief from the 2022 approval with the cart storage.
correct.
We're improving it by
10,
10 feet on one dimension and 105 feet on another dimension.
correct,
So these are decreasing from what was previously granted.
correct.
And top height of all these structures we've talked about so far is a no change condition from the prior approval, I believe. Is that right?
Yes,
So top height is remaining. Moving down, covered storage, we've got a zero net change effectively with the exception of a 10-foot increase to the setback to Old Turnpike Road, and the setback will still be over 1,320 feet as proposed. Is that right?
Correct.
The top height is actually decreasing of that structure by just shy of 1 foot.
Correct.
We're improving, mitigating variance relief for the proposed halfway house administrative building. We're improving it by about 25 feet on a setback dimension from the structure to Punch Bowl Road. Is that right?
Yes.
That's going to be 845 feet as proposed.
Correct.
Carb Troll and Fueling and Washdown building, the net change there is an increased variance. It's a new and intensified variance technically by 50 feet on one dimension and 60 feet on another dimension from Punch Bowl and Old Turnpike respectively. And the proposed setbacks are going to be 660 feet and 1,540 feet respectively. Is that right?
Correct.
But top height is decreasing by about 5 feet down to 19.5 feet from 24.7 feet.
Correct.
And we're also proposing a decrease in overall parking in the area, and you'll explain that shortly, I think, before we talk about the septic. As the board knows, there's a very high parking demand with this site. The zone really doesn't contemplate this type of use. We are 616 spaces required. We are 242 approved with a granted variance for that condition. The proposal is to reduce it by 16 more spaces. Tim, I'll turn to you in a moment as to the logic of that, down to 226 spaces as proposed. There's no membership changes here. There's no increase in membership, rather, I should say. We can handle that capacity loss in the field. And Tim, if you would just show the board what we're talking about in this respect, please.
Yeah. So previously there were, I think we just said there were 23 lined parking spaces shown on our site plan. As we scaled back, we now only show 7 lined parking spaces. But as the facility currently operates, there are no lined parking spaces, and it accommodates the employees. There are other areas such that aren't being disturbed where people can still park. Like this is an existing gravel area, so there's still adequate parking areas. We're just now providing 7 lined parking spaces that we can show on a zoning table.
And Tim, as we testified to during the 2022 hearing, it still remains true that the hours of operation, the services, the membership counts, none of that is anticipated to change by way of this project. This project is for improvements to the existing facility for the existing facility. Is that right?
Correct.
Lastly, Tim, before we turn you over to the board, if we could just describe how we're going to handle the sewer discharge on site.
Sure. I'm going to go to our utility plan because so previously, this is the utility plan CU 101 with a revision date of 12/9/2022. Previously, we were proposing to collect all the sanitary flow from the existing and proposed buildings and discharging it with a pump and a force main out off the property. We've eliminated, that's been eliminated, and it's now proposing to be collected and piped to a septic system, which was designed by another engineer. And I believe it's also been approved by the health department already, but that's where the sanitary is being handled versus a pump station and force main. And I guess similarly with water, we were proposing a new water connection from the system in Punch Bowl Road, but now there is an existing well that provides service to the maintenance facility that's going to maintain and be used for service to the new maintenance facility buildings.
From a design perspective, do you believe these services for the infrastructure are adequate and appropriate for the site and for the use?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we make Mr. Derrick available to any questions you folks might have at this time. It's effectively, a net change of going from A to B in some instances. It's a lot of numbers, a little bit confusing, but overall and thematically, it's essentially the same project you folks saw in 2022 with tweaks largely implemented upon considering this in the field and deciding that further amendments were warranted, thus bringing us back here this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before, entertain questions from other board members. I have a few, just to get straight in my mind. So basically, there were two buildings before that you were contemplating demolishing, and you're now leaving those in place. And some of the others have moved. One of those is the Carpet Control and Fueling Washdown building has moved a little closer because that building is, it was the wood that was to be demolished is still there.
Correct.
So that forced you to move it a little bit. You
Yeah,
mentioned something about you're not encroaching on, or you don't have issues with wetlands anymore.
The previous development had this massive building here, this cold storage, fueling washdown, environmental building was being replaced with a new building. And that sat further, get my directions right, further east, which pushed all the improvements into the wetlands transition
Okay.
area and wetlands.
Okay.
We've moved all the improvements outside of that area and to eliminate any need for
And so
permitting. Any changes there.
incorporate all that, you had to go a little closer to Punch Bowl Road on some of those
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah, and so instead of pushing, previously this massive building's pushed north and to the east a little bit. So now we're just maintaining the existing cold storage building and putting the addition in to this on the southern side of it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board?
I have one.
Yes,
I
please,
have one
Mr. Barrett.
question. I don't know if Mr. Derrick is the appropriate person, Mr. Kelly, for this. Coming out of your meeting with the TCC, the Technical Coordinating Committee, it looks like on January 19th, there was a question about the adequacy of the water supply for firefighting purposes. Is that something
This is the perfect witness for it.
the witness could address?
Certainly.
Perfect.
Good timing.
Well, I guess our position is that there's no change in any of the uses that are being proposed here. There's an existing halfway house that's being replaced. There's an existing cold storage building. There's an existing fueling area that's there. Existing car storage. All the uses there are the same, with the exception of the washdown area is being improved. I mean, everything's being improved. So our position is that the existing hydrant located at the entrance to the facility on Punch Bowl Road is adequate.
Okay, so no changes to the existing facility, but the fact that the question came up, does it suggest that whatever is there is not adequate? And this is something that needs to be addressed?
I guess we don't think there's any changes to this. But although there are changes, there's no changes to the use. So we don't believe there's a trigger to code requirement for any additional fire protection.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, I wasn't at the TCC meeting, so I don't know what the impetus was for that question coming up. I don't know if you have any insights on that or. if it's
I
something
don't,
that's addressed.
I don't have anything further from design perspective to support it. I can, maybe Mr. Rowley might have something to offer shortly, but I do know that Mr. Derrick, Mr. Slate, and the fire officials, I think, have been in contact for some time since proposing this modified solution here. And I don't know what the township officials have to say about it, but I do know Mr. Derrick was endeavoring to try and garner support for a proper and adequate solution, which Langen Engineering believes this is. So from a design perspective, you might have to turn to your own consultants at this time to see if they agree with Mr. Derrick. We might be able to add some more context to it with Mr. Roding shortly, though, as well.
So by way of background, the previous application extended the water main, and there was a hydrant located at the facility, which, obviously helps serve the fire department's needs. I mean, if there's ever going to be a fire on site, it would probably be in this location, just because of the fueling and the maintenance and the type of operation that goes on in this location. I believe the building department also, a requirement was triggered by the building code for the basement of the halfway house, which serves as kind of the maintenance office and locker rooms and bathrooms, for that to be sprinklered. But my understanding is that the well, and they may be providing storage tank, provides sufficient water flow for the basement sprinkler system. There will be, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there will be a connection for the fire department there. If there was some sort of fire, the fire department would connect to that connection and supply additional water to the sprinkler system. We did have some discussions on the need for the water supply back there. It currently meets, I would say, my understanding of the code requirements. There was some concern about significant cost. Southeast Mars, the local water company, requires a significant amount of improvements in order to extend a water main into the property. There's a water meter, there's check valves, there's what's known as a hot box, basically, to keep all those meters and valves from freezing. So there's significant expense associated with that. I mean, we were, pushing for, the hydrant to go back into the plan. We did also discuss the possibility of a dry line where you wouldn't require the metering and the valving and the hot box, where you could have a hydrant or basically be a standpipe adjacent to the hydrant on Punch Bowl Road. And then a dry line would be laid back to this facility with a hydrant that, a first due engine could make the connection from the hydrant to this standpipe and then pull in rather than dropping, I'm going to say it's about 600 or 700 feet of hose. They could just pull in and then hit that hydrant at the facility, and it would be charged by the hydrant that's out by Punch Bowl Road. Some of the benefits of that is, as you pull in and drop hose, the access road kind of gets cut off because you got now hose that's kind of snaking back and forth, 5-inch line that you can't drive over. But I don't know if that's an adequate summary. I kind of threw a bunch of different things out there, but that's kind of our discussions in a nutshell between the fire department and the applicant, and what was previously approved on the prior site plan.
Okay.
I guess my question would be, this may not be ideal from what you're talking about, but is it adequate?
Yes.
That's the,
Okay.
comes down to.
Working backwards from where we wanted to be with the applicant and the cost and all that, it's definitely adequate. And we worked with the fire subcode, the building department, engineering, and myself, and they've met the requirements as we see fit in the code. So they're actually above and beyond the code. They're adding a standpipe connection for us, which isn't necessarily something they have to do, but we require that as well. So it just helps us. So,
Thank you.
nice job.
Any other questions?
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Benwell.
On the package plant, I'm assuming it's a packaged wastewater plant. That's just for the sanitary sewer. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes. I mean, the septic system is just for the sanitary.
All
Is that
right.
what you're asking?
You're treating it on site, so
Yes, it's all, there's a septic field located.
oh,
This
it's a
box represents,
septic field. It's not a packaged wastewater treatment plant.
sorry, yeah,
It's just a
it's-
septic field.
there's a septic, proposed
Okay, I'm
septic
sorry.
It's
field.
on their property.
Right. And so the stormwater is not going in there.
No,
And nothing from the environmental building is going in there. I don't remember the details on what the environmental was about, but
the environmental building is really, it's a washdown area. It's a self-contained washdown area and storing of other materials that the golf course superintendent may have.
does that go into the septic system?
No, well, the washdown facility is, the whole purpose of it is just to be self-contained, so no water discharges from it.
Oh, okay.
It's so they can wash down, they wash down their equipment, it falls into drains where it's then filtered and reused to wash down again. So
Okay.
it's a closed system.
Right. That's right. Okay, that's all I had. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Just to clarify that point again, one of the conditions of approval in the last one was that there be a water reclamation system as part of the washdown. So that stipulation it's still part of the plan?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Do you want to move to the next witness? Do we want to hear the architect? Do we feel you need to hear the architect? Or do
No.
we want to
Yeah,
move
that's
right to
fine.
the planner?
I just want to make, I apologize.
Oh, so we have to input from professionals beyond what we've had and public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Yes.
I did, probably want to start with the engineers. Mike.
Yes. Anything beyond there?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for getting that.
No, and I have, and I apologize, I have a few. But also the applicant will stipulate not only to the Water Reclamation Commission, but condition, but all other prior conditions of the previous approval to the extent not inconsistent with an approval that might be granted this evening by this board?
Yes, they'll all carry forward to the extent not inconsistent.
Thank you. Thought I heard reference to an approval or a possible approval by the Board of Health with respect to the septic system that was designed by another engineer. Do we know whether or not the Board of Health has approved that design?
Yes, they have.
They have, okay. Bear with me 1 second, please. Okay. I'll hold it. I have nothing further right now. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members of the public with questions for this witness? Seeing none, I guess we can proceed then now.
I don't think architectural changes are significant, so I don't know that we need to hear from the architect.
I agree.
Okay, then why don't we move on? I agree with
Despite
that.
Mr. Roding's feelings being very hurt.
That's right.
now, the planner.
Yeah.
I'll live.
Yes, so we can move on to your planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ted.
Just leave them, I guess, maybe. I don't think so. I won't disconnect. I'll just bring it back to you.
So, Paul, I know you've testified before this board relatively recently on a country club matter, as a matter of fact. You were sworn in, you were qualified as a licensed professional planner. That license remains current and in good standing this evening.
It does.
Mr. Chairman, we could certainly go through Mr. Ricky's qualifications. I think he was here about a month or two ago.
Yes, it wasn't that long ago. Well.
Thank you,
yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Go
you, Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
I was not going to drill down through the variances one by one. I think the engineer did a thorough job through that. So I was just going to focus on the planning testimony if that's appropriate. We're seeking the variances under the flexible C2 criteria, where we can show we advance the purpose of the municipal land use law and that the variances can be granted without a substantial detriment to your zone plan and your public good. In this context, I'll go through that hopefully pretty succinctly. And also show how, this is a better zoning alternative in this context. Again, we're in your OSU GU district. I had us at 146 acres, but in that 146 acre range, 140 acre range, permitted use, large oversized tract. And something I mentioned during the last application is that this is a very specific zone, right? And I talked about how the council really gave the board great liberality, in my opinion, as to how it applies standards here, and specifically what it says regarding within your schedule of bulk regulations. Because of the wide diversity and nature of the uses permitted in the zone, no specific area, bulk, and yard requirements are provided. The planning board, in reviewing any site plan for uses proposed in the zone, shall use generally accepted planning standards to minimize the impact on surrounding development, to ensure adequate circulation, protection, ecological, and environmental elements, and shall approve only those plans designed to carry out the general intent of this zone. And I think here clearly the reinvestment, the positives associated that the country club is making or positives for the community. I think it's clear that this is a use that provides a great deal of open space to the community as a whole. This is not an application that's dramatically changing the country club or the character of the area. In regard to the setback variances, the closest building that's shown on the chart is 580 feet from a public road. I think potentially where variances are being impacted this evening, it's approximately 640 feet. When you look through your schedule of regulations to compare to other zones in the community, your OL 40 office district, it has the largest setback of anywhere in the community is a 300-foot front yard setback. And that's on a site that requires a 40-acre minimum lot size. So we're essentially double that for accessory buildings at a minimum in this context. So I think it's clear that this application is largely within the intent and purpose of your zone plan and would not result in any negative detrimental impacts
regarding the building heights, and this is something I discussed in the past as well. In the zone, you do contemplate single-family homes up to 35 feet in height on 3-acre properties. So to the extent that you have buildings as high here as 31.67 feet on setbacks that are significantly greater than principal permitted use of single-family home, I don't believe that that increased height will result in a substantial detriment to the zone plan. I think this is really a nuance. The code didn't really have specific standards for this type of use. I think it clearly results in sound land use planning and is appropriate as provided. This advances, it's not really specific requirements in your master plan, but your 2017 master plan, while this is a private facility, says preservation and enhancement of historic sites and recreational facilities for the public enjoyment is encouraging that. To renovate and upgrade existing park facilities as appropriate, including modernization of neighborhood park facilities. I think it's consistent with the spirit of your master plan in that regard. For these reasons, I think this application advances purpose A, it promotes the general welfare, and purpose G, it provides sufficient space for this commercial use to upgrade itself over time. And I think I largely talked about the negative criteria here with my discussion of the application. I think it's clear that these variances can be granted without a substantial detriment to the public good, namely the surrounding property owners, due to the substantial setbacks and the intent and purpose of your zone plan that we exceed any setback required in the township by a magnitude of approximately 2. Also here, I think some of the other benefits I heard was that the applicant is no longer impacting potentially DEP regulated environmental features. And while the parking is decreasing somewhat, we heard from the site engineer that adequate parking is still being provided. So I think for all these reasons, this is about as good as an application as you get in land use development today.
Thank you. Any questions? On the board members, professionals?
No questions.
Steve?
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask
Of
at
course
least
you have
one.
to say something.
Did we get verification whether or not the entry for the 9-foot entrance column in the zoning table under fences and walls was previously approved per the TC comment number 7?
Well, we had walls and fencing as part of the 2022 approval, Steve. I thought this came up back during the last application. To the extent it hasn't been, or just for belt and suspended purposes, the applicant would ask the board consider that improvement and memorialize it as part of this 2023 approval. This way, moving forward, it's there by way of right and ratification pursuant to board approval. I thought this came up previously, but as I said, to the extent it hadn't, I would ask that it be incorporated here.
And would our 2020, our prior approval did reference a bulk variance for 9-foot tall fencing and solid entrance columns, as opposed to 3.5 foot in height, being the maximum permitted since it's a front yard. So I think it was covered, frankly.
I thought it was too.
But
Where are the columns? I mean, the fencing, yes, I could figure out where that was and where it would be. Where are the columns?
They're at the entry drive, Mr. Chairman, as you're coming up the approach.
The main entrance drive
On Punch Bowl, correct?
Yeah,
to the clubhouse, not to the maintenance area.
as you're coming up towards the driving range.
Oh,
I
okay,
remember. that.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
we talked about
That's why they weren't on these plans. Okay.
yeah, I believe,
Right.
I think it's prudent for the board to either concur that it was previously approved, and I think it was previously
Okay.
approved, frankly, but, or, the belt and suspenders, to grant the relief. I don't believe the board needs to re-grant that relief. I believe it was previously granted. And I think, actually, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of the public of this witness? Seeing none, I guess we're done with that portion. If you want anything to say to wrap up your,
I think, yeah, I'll dispense with the wrap, Mr. Chairman. I know the board understands this project very well.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, and again, it may have been my not hearing you, but did you ask both for public question and
oh,
public
I
comment?
forgot public comment. Right, no, I asked for question. Any comment on this application? Seeing none, okay, sorry. Thank you for
Attorney
that
can rest easy
clarification. I
now.
forgot there's question and comment period. I have to read the little cheat sheet here.
Mr. Chairman, one final item, and it's an item I spoke about previously with Mr. Slate, and we talked about it at Tech as well. And it's one, I guess, maybe not for board consideration, but perhaps board recommendation, and that is the applicant has undertaken over the course of months trying to modify, tweak, and improve a lot of these details on his plan. A lot of it involved interfacing with municipal officials as to the fire control prevention measures, as to the septic details. And the applicant now really is hopeful to get underway immediately, like most applicants are, right, that you boards see before you. However, this is sort of time sensitive for a variety of items and issues related to the club starting more proper operations when the weather turns. So the applicant is hopeful to start with what I'll call site preparation. The environmental building, it's prefab. So the applicant needs to install the footings and the foundations, really is the predicate to get that building going, as well as the septic. The applicant is hopeful to be able to start pursuing this pursuant to all permit filings promptly. But the goal is, as fast as I know Steve can churn out a resolution, it's going to be a few weeks before we see that and it's adopted. So the applicant at their own risk would like to try, and if the board has no issues, and of course, Mr. Slate, Mr. Warner, the building department doesn't have an issue either, submit permits so that that work might be able to start, should permits issue ahead of resolution adoption for that limited, what I'm calling site preparation and site work and furtherance of implementing these approvals. I think the septic alone really wouldn't trigger a site plan in of itself. The environmental building certainly does, but these efforts would help the applicant get underway in sort of a linear fashion in parallel with awaiting resolution adoption. This way they don't lose a month. So that would be the ask, is to start, if this board voted favorably to approve this, start with those limited efforts relatively immediately upon proper permit filing.
What kind of precedent is for that?
Well, no precedent other than the fact that it's not a unique request, and certainly the board has the discretion to grant it in connection with the applicant taking it upon the applicant. You know, it's their own risk, and to the extent, and I would guide the board to be guided by our engineer to the extent it is site prep work that may precede the adoption of a resolution of approval if this is granted. There's no legal prohibition against it. And certainly there's a 45-day appeal period after a resolution is adopted, at which time the same thing would occur. The applicant would be proceeding with anything at their own risk. So again, I think Jim's the most important person to talk to about that from a guidance standpoint.
My question is are they asking to fast track their permits, or are they asking, I'm a little
No.
confused.
I believe you're just asking to go ahead, apply for the permits
And should
Taking
they issue
site prep
prior to
work.
resolution
It's not-
adoption?
it's not
and,
work, it's
and
actually just
possibly
permits.
start some.
And start, no, and start. If
start
permits,
site
if permits
preparation
issue, the applicant would like to commence. And it might be a matter of days saved, but those days are huge from the development side of this project.
Any thoughts, Jim?
There have been requests like this previously, and, we have proceeded with the allowing the applicant to submit, permits in advance. I mean, technically, the end of the 45-day period, they're at risk for a potential appeal. If there was a line of neighbors here that were concerned about this project, I'd have some more reservations about it, but I don't have a problem with them, submitting permits and, advancing the project ahead of memorialization.
I guess my feeling is, since the application is so very similar to one that we've already approved, and the resolution is that there isn't a lot of risk, there's not a lot of difference in the site preparation kind of involved. I don't see an issue with it necessarily. It is their risk if something happens and there's objection and it's filed, but
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask our engineer. Typically, Jim, after somebody gets their resolution memorialized, how long does it take them to meet the conditions? Is that a 2-month process, a 3-month
Months.
process?
I'd say months, minimum months.
Morris Township believes about 60 to 90 days?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how quick their, engineer and architect are at addressing, conditions in the resolution approval. As the chairman mentioned, this has kind of already gone through the ringer, a year ago. So, they're a little more advanced
So
than
30 days for a
most.
permit, 90 days for resolution compliance, they could save themselves about 120 days by moving forward, but they would be subject to whatever changes that happen during resolution compliance if it is opposite of what they've done in the field.
You may need to repeat that question for me. But
I'm just trying to
I don't see anything
context.
changing from, what was discussed, or, I don't know if there's really going to be any major changes to the plans that come out of the resolution of approval. Put it that way. I don't know of any major
Right.
conditions that are going to change something where a footprint could move or something, along those lines, which is, potentially a problem. But, any revisions to the plan need to be addressed before, they pull permits. It's just kind of advancing the process, as you mentioned, by, 90 to 120 days. It's probably a good estimate.
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess it's not clear to me, what would be the impact on the club if the difference between allowing things to run its normal course, let's say 120 days for the resolution to be adopted, or if the process is started earlier, whatever the timeline is for a normal resolution process, or expediting it, let's say half the time, is it a matter of losing days to work on the project or membership? I mean, what is the impact of the delay?
It's relatively significant, and I'm gonna let Mr. Rawding, who the board did not want to hear testify tonight, I'm gonna let, he can't help but get up. He's got to say something. He's got to earn his keep.
I
So
didn't say
I'll-
we didn't want him to testify. It's just we didn't necessarily
my
need
words.
him.
For the record, those were my words, Mr. Chairman. You're right.
It is a good question, but it goes to efficiency of maintenance, and they're trying to open the golf course up with a lot of equipment. A lot of equipment right now is being temporarily stored outside. You're talking about disruption to that whole facility. They won't be able to get up and operating back to full force until that facility's done. So it goes to it does impact the operations of the facility if it's not completed in a timely fashion.
That makes sense. So you could maximize the good days when people are out there and
Right.
the members are there. Okay.
I feel like I'm missing something. Aren't we talking about 2 weeks? It'll be in 2 weeks that we approve the resolution?
Well,
Or at
They've
our
also
next
got-
you
meeting?
also have to wait for the
Building
appeal
permits.
process.
Well, we would have to wait for that.
2
Building
weeks.
permits and also resolution compliance.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again?
They got building permits. It could take 30 days to get a building permit.
Yes?
So that they would have to wait 2 weeks to start their building permitting process. So he's looking to
Yes.
start sooner. And then they would have to wait, it could be 90 days to get a resolution compliance. So they're looking to start without that resolution compliance and then be subject to any changes that occur during resolution compliance.
Anything we do tonight will help them only to the extent of 2 weeks. Isn't
No.
that correct?
It could be 120 days.
I would say if Steve is able to do a resolution in 2 weeks.
And have
so
all
there's-
board professionals and applicants professionals review same, yes.
All right. Assuming Steve can get the resolution done in 2 weeks.
Mr.
And
Chairman.
Liz and I can review it in that period as well. Then the normal course would be a 45-day appeal period. They would submit their permits at the end of the 45-day appeal period, and then the review would start.
We're
So
saving them at least 2 months, if not more.
The 45 days is for members of the public to protest. I'm sorry, who would?
If anybody wanted to file an appeal of this board's grant under those circumstances to the Superior Court, they have 45 days from the date of notice of adoption of the resolution in the paper, which is usually a day or two after the board adopts the resolution.
And
And to
this
be clear,
board
the
can-
exposure is the applicants. The exposure
Yeah.
on all this is nothing but on the applicant. The applicant is just eager to commence for the reasons that we've indicated. There is no exposure on the part of the township or the board. Mr. Warner can certainly, I think, agree with that statement I just made.
And there is precedent for this.
There, again, while you don't have to worry about precedent, because there's no such thing as precedent in land use law, Nevertheless, you also don't have to
Okay.
worry about this because there's plenty of precedent for it.
To use your legal double negative,
Mine
it
is
is not
negative.
unprecedented.
I may go to a
Yeah.
quadruple negative if
We're
I'm not
doing
careful.
anything new and different than it's ever been.
Yeah,
done.
no, it's not, nothing different. Yeah, it's almost a routine request nowadays, in my opinion. And certainly the board is well within its discretion and wouldn't be precedent setting, discriminatory in any way. If it were to grant or deny, it would. And again, that's why I say, listen to the engineer, because exactly what they want to do and when they want to do it is more the ballywick of Jim than it is of me.
And if I was assuming all the risk of
Absolutely.
this thing going through.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand.
Sure.
Did you want to speak first or that?
No, I'm ready to make a move.
Oh, okay. So the applicant would be allowed to file for permits after we approve a resolution that gives them the right to do that?
No, I
They
think
would
what,
have to file
or-
tomorrow.
or-
if this
or
board-
yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah, they're looking to go, yeah. Normally this board, say in 2 weeks, would adopt the resolution and then within 2 days, Sonia would have it published in the newspaper. Then there'd be a 45-day period by which anybody can appeal the decision of the board to the Superior Court should they so desire, after which they are barred. Anyone wanting to do so is barred. So there's about a 2-month minimum period there that they are requesting they be allowed to proceed and not wait that period of time at their own risk with potentially pulling permits and doing some, what I heard was site preparatory work as described.
And it happens so frequently that we actually have a form that the applicants have to sign off, like you're assuming all risk, advancing your permits. I mean, typically the permits aren't, if everything's perfect with them, maybe it's 30 days for them to get issued and pay the fees and all that sort of stuff. So there's time delay and the applicant's just trying to get a jump on those permits moving forward.
So normally they were not allowed to apply for those permits until there's a resolution in hand and the waiting period.
That would be
has
like a
been-
normal course of action, but
Okay.
quite frequently people want to say, can we pull our permits, or submit the permits early and start the review process? And then,
Right.
typically maybe they wouldn't be issued until the end of that 45-day period or whatever, but it's kind of coincides with the not time that they need to review and revisions to the plans and that sort of stuff that goes on.
I feel like I'm holding everybody up here. So would our resolution have to indicate that we are granting this relief as well?
Candidly, it might not have to, but I intend that it would have a reflection of that that the board has permitted the applicant to proceed at their own risk accordingly.
Okay, all right,
So-
thank you.
Sure. So, and frankly, as you all know probably by now, I look at these, what just occurred as a learning opportunity.
Right.
This is great, I think. I might be alone or in the minority, but hey.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion
Please do.
that we approve the amended application as presented this evening and offer an opportunity for accelerated progress to the applicant.
And all stipulated to
All
conditions.
Stipulated conditions that you can dream up. Yes.
I can assure you I got them all.
I'd like to second the motion.
Anything else you want to? Okay.
No, That's amended approval, all the variance relief sought as identified. I won't go through the entire chart,
Okay.
but we have it and I did review it and it does appear to be accurate. And the conditions are the conditions of prior approval that are not inconsistent with this approval. The ADA access subject to the review and approval of the building department. Bear with me. And we had the expedited condition as well as what's on condition? Where's condition? The water reclamation condition, which is a carry forward from the last one. And I believe that's everything.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, Sonia?
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Alessa,
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes?
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Benoit,
Yes.
Goodbye.
Yes.
So moved.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you and appreciate your time.
Yeah, the notice to stop the building.
We have a,
Stop.
Other matters.
is there a commentary for public other than?
Oh, on the,
Well, I didn't want to go through
Remember
it.
last
Yeah,
time?
exactly. But you know what I guess? In St. Elizabeth is one piece of property.
I'm not sure.
Therefore, the subject properties within 200 feet. The project where they're working, probably like a half mile.
Oh, okay.
the, we can certainly amend the agenda to have what we usually have, which is that any members of the public wish to address any matters that are not on the agenda.
Right. That would be now, right?
can do
usually, I think. Or after other
Of a
matters.
land use board, frankly, to have that. Governing bodies have to have that. But just because you don't have to doesn't mean you can't. And we have that.
Well, we traditionally have, I believe. I don't know if anyone, that I would like to amend the agenda to open it up for public comment if there are any on matters unrelated, in general, unrelated to this, the current applications. If anyone, a member of the public has any comments, I'd entertain them now. Okay, I guess not. So we'll close off that and move to other matters then. We don't have any of our legislative committee here, I guess, so we can, unless they can magically telepathy, then we'll move on to the bylaws, which we discussed last week, or last meeting, and were passed out and added. Does anyone have any additional comments on them?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question.
Yes.
This document,
Well, that would be next.
oh, that's coming up.
That would be coming up, right?
Mr. Chair, is there bylaws, the rules and regulations for 2023? Is that document?
Yes,
I wasn't here at the last meeting. Okay.
yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman, do these need to be approved?
Yeah,
Yes, I think formally we do. I think
They
that's
do.
in the bylaws, isn't it?
It's also in the MLUL, as is most of what's in the bylaws. But we're only so creative. But we did, I hope, capture the last round of, there are only a few proposed changes, and they're still highlighted, I believe, in the copy that the board got. They're highlighted in the copy I got. No? Okay.
Very grateful for that. Thank you.
Oh, phew.
Well, there's
Yeah.
so few that you won't see them barely.
Yeah,
Oh,
perhaps.
in the margin? Okay.
Yeah, they're black lines.
Yeah,
Just-
right.
just take a look at those
Yeah.
marks. They're not
Got
many.
me there. too.
Right.
Tiny little-
Yeah, we had some discussions on some items, and ultimately the board determined not to make any changes.
Right.
And a few of them were
Right.
changed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have one suggestion. Is it possible to put a date, maybe right under rules and regulations for 2023, the date that they were adopted?
That would make sense in my mind.
And
Yes.
then if it's okay with you, I'll make a motion that we approve these minutes as redrafted or as amended.
I second. I like having a revision date in the footer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it
Yeah,
shows up
that-
on
that
every
would
single
be good.
page as opposed to on the title page. So that would be my recommendation, but I agree with Mr. Lesso, having a revision date is,
I'm fine with wherever the revision date is, as long as it's in there.
Yeah, okay. I would,
Yeah, but we
good suggestion.
certainly.
It could be on every page. I don't have an issue.
I just seconded his
Okay.
with a little.
Oh,
bit.
wait. Yes, Jesse?
So I have 17 quick questions. Just kidding.
I have 17 long answers. Maybe 18, I don't know.
On page 5, and maybe as an alternate member, I might have read this section a little closer than some folks.
Oh, God.
143, alternate to serve until final disposition in the event of disqualification. So is that where only for disqualification, this does not apply for an absence?
Oh, no. It applies. Alternate members It's referenced in 1:4-1. Alternate members replace regular board members either for their absence or if they're disqualified.
Okay, but in this section, it only mentions in the event of disqualification. It doesn't say in the event of disqualification.
Right, because
or
that's,
absence. So that's what I'm saying, is this 143, this is just for disqualification, not. for
correct. And
absence.
it's meant, it's there to make clear that once you serve for a disqualified board member, no matter how long that matter goes on, you continue to serve for that disqualified board member, because that disqualified board member cannot somehow lose the conflict.
Yeah, okay, but if they were absent, then they can catch up and then they come back on and you're off.
Potentially,
Okay,
yes.
all right, that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, no, what happened to the other 14?
16.
You scared him with the 16 wrong answers.
Okay, we have
We still do have a motion second. I guess it's not being changed any.
that's right,
Yeah.
it's not changed, right. Any other comments before we, oh, okay. Sonia, can we have a roll call, I guess?
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Flower,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Alesto,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
and Mr. Pine.
Yes.
So moved.
Okay. Then moving on to the, you mentioned, Ms. Murphy, the procedures for planning and zoning board. Now that did you prepare this, or was this, I mean, we talked, as I recall, last month about that there was something that had been prepared before that we pulled out of the files, or did you prepare this
Well,
again?
this is newly prepared.
This is newly prepared. Okay, that's what I
version,
thought.
And I'll share this is not a requirement, but this is another discretionary item. You don't have to formally vote to adopt this document. But what we've done here and what we've done in other municipalities with for land use boards is to have something like this that can be put on the website, that can be handed out to board members, and can, and in my opinion, always is helpful for members of the public, which, and in facilitating the process, helpful to everyone. This particular document, we took the liberty of sharing it with the zoning board attorney, because it's always my opinion that there should be uniformity where there can be between the two land use boards. And he was kind enough to give us two suggestions. I forgot which two they are, but we adopted them both, incorporated them both. So this is arguably the work product, of both boards. And it is my understanding that the zoning board will be equally considering this, and/or, at least their council recommends that this document be applicable to both boards procedurally. And all I would, I don't want to suggest anything, all I would request is that the board consider any revisions, and ultimately perhaps recommending that it be put on the website and handed out at board meetings, and however else it might be disseminated that you come up with that I haven't come up with yet.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
just have one question.
Yes.
It's not been the practice of this board to ask people in the audience to raise their hand and be recognized before they come to the microphone. Most often what we see is people kind of lining, if there's more than one person, they kind of line up and speak. So that was my only question is,
That's a good point.
do we really want to introduce the raising of the hand in recognition?
Yeah, I had
It's
this,
it's
that
a little
was,
bit different than we've operated in the past. And that applies in a couple of places here on this back page.
Right.
Just a thought. I mean, I'm not totally opposed to it. It's just we haven't typically done that.
Perhaps we can say something along the lines of, if you have a question, please come to the podium and upon being acknowledged by the chair, speak into the microphone.
Yes.
think
I
that would
like
be-
the idea of the chair acknowledging someone, so it's not a sort of a free-for-all wrestling for the microphone.
Right.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
I know that would never happen.
There hasn't been any fighting over the microphone.
I haven't.
No,
I'm
they-
aware
no,
of, but-
no,
I guess it could happen.
that has gone quite well, but
We can certainly make that a change and carry it forward where appropriate as I start
Thank
reading.
Everything else looks fine to me.
One thing I want to raise, and I did look at this, is I guess the practice is, or it's the rule, I don't know exactly whether it's a practice or rule, is that in order to be acknowledged, a member of the public has to be here physically in person and queue up and ask questions. But in this, post-COVID world, the reality is that even in courts these days, people are allowed to participate virtually. And I wonder if that's something we might want to consider doing going forward.
Well,
If that were a motion, I would second that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I had this
Okay.
discussion
All right,
on
sorry,
that.
I believe
Sorry.
technically,
We talked about
Board Member Quillen, it was not a motion.
it. It looked like it.
But yeah, well, that's it. We've had discussions and may continue, who knows, to have discussions regarding remote participation, but when we are acting in our quasi judicial role, hearings on applications for development, it is problematic to have, and doing so in an entirely in-person proceeding, it's problematic, to say the least, to have remote questioning and remote public comment, because that, in essence, becomes a hybrid, and the board has chosen not to proceed in hybrid or entirely remote fashion for its meetings, particularly its hearings on development applications.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more in terms of community participation. If someone in the community, Bill Barrett, Oak Park Drive, represent who they are and is sworn in, if it turns out they aren't who they say they are, I take it there would be some repercussions. And
Well, even in that regard, that's witness testimony. And while we can still currently do it remotely or in a hybrid fashion or in an entirely in-person fashion, the board has already chosen to continue hearings in an entirely in-person fashion. So there would not be any remote participation in the applications for development.
okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. If this
Yeah.
has been dealt with and
Yeah, I
addressed,
think
like I
that
said, I wasn't
was
here
the,
last
that was
week,
the
so-
sense of the board last
Yeah,
week,
yeah,
at least
yeah.
for another year.
That's what
anyways.
happens when you're not here.
Yeah. It's
I was
okay.
the only vote the other way.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got you.
George would, yeah, right.
Oh.
But it can always revisit
They
it next
snuck-
year.
They snuck it in when I wasn't here.
Yeah,
Chairman, I'm just looking at this and just wondering if we should put a caveat in here, because there have been times where we deviate from policy and allow several witnesses to testify, and then we allow the public, when the board members, to question the witnesses as opposed to one by one. And I just don't think we want to take that away from ourselves. If there is a very simple 2 or 3 witnesses in a row. Did I miss that?
Very last sentence.
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
no, I know what you mean, but I think there's somewhere in there that says that,
That
at
last
the board's
sentence at the
discretion.
bottom?
Each application is unique and deviations from the outline if necessary.
Oh, okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
right, that would, yeah, yeah,
Believe in Steve.
I like that.
right.
Sometimes less is more, sometimes less
Right.
creates problems.
I mean, this is just guidelines. We don't even
Fine.
have to vote
Right.
on this, and I don't think we should vote on it.
No.
Again, I think that just
You're
as a
handing out
board,
the
you may
public.
wish
Yeah.
to have a joint vote to endorse it to be put on the website and handed out. So it has your imprimatur.
Yeah, man, I think out of our discussions last month, there was the sense this was a good idea, that they had been done before, and that was something that we should, and would probably, well, hopefully help and kind of explain, what's going on in the procedures. And
Mr.
so-
Chairman,
Yes,
I agree with that. And I just wanted to say, I think that it came out of a comment that I made that I felt like sometimes the public doesn't understand what it is that they are allowed to ask a question about. So I feel like this does explain that and in a respectful way to support everybody in understanding this process. So, you know, most of the time we don't need this, but sometimes we really need this, where the chair can reference to everyone and say, okay, you know, just let's all review the first bullet here. Because when that is not being adhered to, it really does take a lot of time away from the matter for everyone. And I think it's important. So I think this is important, and I think it should be on the website, and I think it should be maybe sitting out on a desk in the hall for people to take if they want, as they come in, and should be referenced when there's when there's not an understanding on the part of the public.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I agree. I just, you know, it's kind of hard if people are up there and they're passionate in what they're saying and you're saying, no, this is not the time for that, without some background that can come across as, you know, that you're kind of picking on them or jumping on them, but no, they're, you know, these are the rules.
In other planning board scenario or environments that I've not participated in it, but spent a lot of time in, the planning board attorney has a pretty significant role in doing that. And that would be, I think, something that they're empowered to do by the board. So I'm all for empowering the planning board attorney in respectfully assisting the public when necessary and understanding what it is they're doing, they're allowed to do, or is what is permitted to do in terms of questioning. I think that's valuable for everyone. And takes a little pressure off all, you know, you
Well,
particularly.
and the attorney, I mean, he's
Right.
not jumping in there and making it look like they're just pulling this out of thin air. It's, you know,
Sure.
it's a stated policy, something to refer to, so, or stated guidelines, so.
So maybe a motion second and a voice vote, if the board is amenable just to approving the procedures statement and or endorsing saying to be on the website and handed out for all meetings.
Yes.
I make a motion, we endorse the guidelines, and I recommend that they be posted on the website and a stack be posted at the front door of the chamber before every planning board hearing.
A second. That motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
It's gonna help.
Then make the revisions and we'll get them out. And thank you. And
It's 8:30. Can I make another motion?
well, I want to thank Tanya for kicking this off last month too. You know, that was a good idea. I think it's a really nice thing to do. So be very helpful. So now I'll entertain the motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.